More on this guest, on this story. Our guest is Marco Vicenzino, international affairs commentator and director of the Global Strategy Project. Thank you so much for joining us on France 24. Mohammed bin Salman mentioned Khashoggi's murder this Wednesday in his speech in Riyadh, but he mentioned it only briefly. What has his strategy been in dealing with this scandal?
Now, up until recently, most of it was shifting stories that basically led to lack of credibility. But I think in recent days, what's happened is that he's decided to seize the initiative, and he's using the Future Investment Initiative Forum, the conference, the international conference, which most Western leaders and business community pulled out of. He's using that as a forum to basically push forward, saying that this was committed by other individuals. He had no responsibility. So, and if you look today, also when he was at the conference speaking, next to him was a Lebanese prime minister, and that was the same individual that was detained by Mohammed bin Salman about a year ago, and then eventually released him with the intervention of President Macron of France. What he's trying to do is get a lot of his traditional allies in the region, trying to shore up solidarity amongst them and support for the Saudi monarchy. Many of these states, though not all of them, obviously dependent also upon Saudi largesse. So right now, I think it's important for him to seize that initiative, because in the past 2 weeks, they've been on the defensive, and part of their ad hoc strategic management campaign was not a good one. Basically, like I said, the shifting stories were leading to a loss of credibility at home and internationally.
But with MBS taking selfies yesterday, the opening day of that conference, Hariri sitting next to him, I mean, it almost seems like MBS feels that there are no consequences ever for his actions.
But he has to take the initiative. I mean, in terms of, if you look at the United States, for example, President Trump, the same thing with him, and also President Erdogan. This is a fast-moving crisis. Each one wants to seize the initiative. President Trump is under a lot of pressure right now. Basically, the initial week or two of the crisis, he was on the defensive. Now the shifting stories, he has found it personally frustrating. Now he's gone pretty much on the offensive, seizing the initiative. He sent the CIA director to Istanbul basically to meet with Turkish officials, and he's demanded perfect clarity. So it's not just the actions, but it's also his rhetoric is intensified. And then if you look at President Erdogan, he's continuing his very skillful game. He gave a big speech in his parliament. Basically, he said that he would uncover the naked truth. That didn't happen, but what he did is he posed key questions to the Crown Prince, whatever once ever mentioning his name, while praising King Salman. And those questions basically place even further burden on the Crown Prince. And he was not just speaking to him directly, but it was also directed at him, but within the global spotlight. So this is a fast-moving crisis. Some of them would say, like for example, on the Saudi side, they're trying to buy further time and trying to hopefully this will subside gradually over time. But President Erdogan in particular said there will be no room for cover-up, and he will keep pushing on this until all questions are answered.
In that conversation that took place earlier this Wednesday between President Erdogan and the Crown Prince, the two said that they would work together. In what interest is it for both of them to say that they're going to work together on a story that they're clearly on opposite sides of?
Well, basically, the Turkish president does not want to have a diplomatic showdown with Saudi Arabia, but at the same time, it doesn't want to back down within the eyes of the global community, and also for Erdogan at home. What he's trying to do is this more in a diplomatic. There's a legal route, and then there's a diplomatic political route. On the legal route, he seems to have quite strong evidence, and I don't think we've seen all the evidence yet. He's holding more cards, and he'll release them more through leaks to apply pressure both to the Saudis and to the U.S. And then there's also the political diplomatic route, is trying to shore up international public opinion, and that's what his speech in Parliament was directed, actually more or less at that, is making sure that he's strengthened, that he has leverage, not just on the facts, but in terms of international public opinion. And also you have Saudi investments. You have a lot of Saudi investments in Turkey, and if he goes too hard, if he confronts him too hard, that can basically lead to capital flight and divestment when the Turkish economy is a very terrible state. Remember, within the past month or so, there's been more than a third drop in the Turkish lira. So although he's strong, you could say, in the political diplomatic front in terms of international public opinion, he still has the economic element of the relationship that he has to keep a close eye on.
Thank you. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. Marco Vicenzino, thank you for joining us. You are international affairs commentator and director of the Global Strategy Project. Thank you for being on France 24. Moving on to other news now, and preparing for a fresh assault, Yemeni officials